Hey, welcome back to Tiny Garage Fabrication. Today we're getting started on tearing apart the Datsun 620 pickup. Got a little bit of work to do. Going to attempt to get the front disassembled so it'll be easier to get to the front suspension, because I've got to cut out the upper tower, I guess we'll call it. It's the upper shock mount, and it's also where the upper control arm cross pin bolts into. Anyway, it's got to be changed because the mount for the 720 upper control arm is different. So I'm just going to go ahead and graft the 720 mount into this. Do a little bit of frame surgery to make everything work out the way I want it, so that I can get the drop spindles, so we can lower it and still ride good, etc., etc. So let's turn to. First step in every project is the first piece you remove. I decided to start with the grille, and then I was going to move on to the fenders to give me better access to remove the suspension components. But as I went to loosen the first bolt, it broke. Okay, so looking at the truck, I realized that because I can't pull the inner fenders or the regular fenders, it's going to be kind of a pain in the butt to get rid of everything that's under there. So the best bet is for me to be able to crawl into the engine bay. So we're pulling the motor and the transmission. Almost every engine removal begins with taking the hood off. Here we go, simple. Remove interferences with the air cleaner, spark plugs, some other small things. Try to get rid of the cooling system, the radiator, the fan shroud. Move on to a couple of accessories after this. Some of that's not quite pictured. Spill antifreeze everywhere, because that always happens. Go ahead and remove some more fluids. Take the engine oil out. Luckily, the engine oil doesn't have anywhere to spill, unlike the trans fluid, which I also spilled everywhere. But it started to come out easy enough, and then the transmission shifter mechanism got stuck on the floor pan. It has a weird, like a hook in it, and it just full on stuck, and it took me forever to get all the stuff. I had to take the mount off and more shifter parts. I had to remove the drive shaft and the transmission cross member, just a whole bunch of stuff. Finally, boom, there it was. Fist pump. All right, so after that, pretty simple, just goes up. Luckily, my chain kept slipping on the hook, and it just kept naturally tilting the way it needed to tilt. Engine came right out. Go ahead and throw it on a rack, shove it in the corner for a little while, and we'll get to that in a later episode. This is the front frame that I cut out of the 83 Datsun 720. Now, first thing, I'm going to remove the springs or the torsion bars. The C-clips that hold these in are a serious pain in the butt, but once you get that C-clip out of the rear, just a couple of taps on the rear end and these things slide right out. I did mark them so I know where they go back in. And then start removing some other stuff, the power steering, the shocks, just some of the stuff I'm not going to use. And then we'll just go ahead and take off the bulk of the front suspension. I'm gonna go ahead and just take off the upper control arms and then the lower control arm pivots at the same time. The sway bar as well comes out. And then we'll just go ahead and tear all this stuff apart. Pretty simple, didn't take a whole lot of time. I did mess up though, and you'll see that in a minute. I completely forgot to loosen the lower control arm tension rods before I took the lower control arms out. What a dumbass. So this is how I fixed that. I took the lower control arm off of everything, just ran some bolts through real quick, bam, bam, bam with the rattle gun, and out they came. Easy peasy. Okay, so here's a crazy contraption that I built up. I put the back of this thing on jack stands, I got an old little scissor type jack out of a car. I placed a level across the cross member there, assuming that that should be level when the suspension is level. Anyway, the reason I'm doing this is I need to find axle center line on these towers because the geometry, so the motor mount plates are different, the cross member and lower controller mounts are slightly different. All these parts are different than they are in the 620, so I want to find axle center line so that I can put these towers centered above the cross member, which is the lower control arm pivot in the 620. That way the geometry of the upper and lower control arms matches. So I've got everything level. There's these holes through it. I got a piece of pipe that fit right into the holes. Now it appears that those holes are axle center line references, because by standing above it, it looks like it's dead on. And so I'm going to hang a plumb bob off of there. And now I want to show you this. I was looking for my plumb bob and I couldn't find one. I drove by Harbor Freight last night, but due to the COVID-19 thing, they were closed. So I spun up an idea in my head. I got home, I drew it up in Fusion 360. I printed it real quick, and I just went ahead and I made my own plumb bob. Let's see here. So it's got a little hole, runs all the way through it. Got a string that comes out of it, and I modeled threads into it. Oops, crap. There you go. So you can see it's threaded, so I can put a 1/2 inch 13 nut on there to give it some weight, and it looks pretty good as a plumb bob. Yeah, it's just what I thought. The holes up here do reference center line, so that'll make it easy. When I put it in, I'll set these up, I'll kind of clamp them in place, I'll set this bar up, and I'll be able to measure off of the 3 holes that are here to make sure that it's not shifted one way or another. But I'll use this same setup to ensure that the geometry straight on the 620. Not a whole lot to say here, so enjoy the montage. Now I'm just finishing up stripping the front of the truck as much as I can. I'm going to pull the headlight buckets out, and then I'm going to get to the bumper. I wanted to pull off the lower valance and like the lower filler panel, but I had some bolts that were stripped and some things were going to break, so I just left it, and I'll pick that stuff up later. I just wanted the stuff out of the way so that I can clean up everything really nice. Alright, so as you can tell, I shot that video over a couple of days. Got the upper control arm mounts cut off of the 720 frame. I took some measurements. I still got 2 more pieces to cut off of that frame. I have to cut all those same components off the 620 frame. But first I have to disassemble the entire front suspension. And I want to go ahead and wrap this video up. So we'll cover all the rest of that stuff next time. So stay tuned. We'll get the 620 suspension taken off. Do possibly a comparison of the Kingpin style that's on here to the ball joint style that was on the 720. Let everybody see what's going on, and then you'll kind of see what my plan is for switching the suspension parts around. It's going to be a lot of fun. Please stay tuned, watch the rest of this build. We're getting places pretty quick, so send me a like, please subscribe, ring the bell if you want notifications for more 620 content, and leave me a comment. If you know a little bit about these Datsuns, maybe you see something I'm doing that's totally wrong, please let me know a better way to go about it. Or that completely does it for today. Stay tuned. Thanks for swinging by. Have a good day, everybody.